Do you ever read a book that managed to worm its way into your psyche so effectively that you just can't stop thinking about them all the time? One of the most amazing things about reading is when you encounter an idea so brilliant, so novel, so different from your usual way of thinking that your whole world gets rocked by it. You can separate your life into two halves: the half before you read the book and the half after you read it. These are three books that totally changed the way I looked at the world, and after reading them, I never stopped thinking about them. When an otherwise normal town is suddenly in the grip of a deadly and protracted plague, its inhabitants have to come to grips with the horrors of a pestilence they seem unable to control. Having now lived through one pandemic, Camus managed to grasp so much of the emotion that comes with living through such an event in this novel. At first, it's the confusion, the denial, the half-hearted instructions from our institutions. But as the scale of the problem becomes clear, and no sign of any intervention making a difference, the inhabitants become increasingly desperate. He captures how rapidly the announcement of the daily death toll becomes mundane, how quickly we become detached from the true horror of what's occurring. And it isn't until the doctor comes knocking at the door that the characters are suddenly spurred into these emotional outbursts, often begging and pleading the doctor not to take away their family members. The characters are complex and each develop their own unique and often surprising reaction to the plague. You've got the priest, Panelou, whose faith is tested by the death of a young child. You've got Rambert, who's a journalist who's not from the town, and he spends most of the novel trying to escape it, often complaining to the doctor, who he's unaware of that the doctor's own wife has been separated from him. One of my favourite characters is a low-ranking official whose name is Grand, who spends the whole plague trying to perfect the opening line of a novel that he's writing. An absolutely absurd preoccupation during a plague that's killing hundreds of people a day. Cottard, who's Grand's neighbour in the book, he has committed some sort of crime that he's not telling anyone about, and he's the only person that doesn't want this plague to end. So, because the plague is happening, Cottard is being left alone by the authorities that he's upset. As the plague sort of comes to its end, he becomes increasingly more and more desperate to try and find some sort of reassurance that there's going to be a new start for him and maybe he's going to escape whatever it is that he's done. The plague ends with as much mystery as it begins. One day the medicine and interventions that they're using don't work, and then the next day suddenly they do. I read this thing cover to cover in 2 days. It's short, it's utterly captivating, and if you're looking for an introduction to absurdist fiction and Albert Camus, it's a great place to start. A man, Joseph, is accused of a crime he doesn't understand, and he finds himself embroiled in a complex, secret legal system that he's unable to control. At first, Joseph is unconcerned with this false allegation, but as he struggles to understand the obscure workings of the legal system, he becomes ever more unhinged and desperate. The work borders on a horror as you come to realise that this uncaring and dysfunctional bureaucratic machine cares little for its stated goal, preferring its unstated and hidden rules and regulations to rationality and logic. There's a scene where Joseph goes to the court and he acts exactly as you'd expect him to act, speaking in his own defence. But the reaction of that court makes no sense to Joseph, and later in the novel he learns he's done exactly the wrong thing. Everything in this court is just about as far opposite from the courts of law and justice that we consider fair. The first time I read the trial, I was both confused and a little disappointed when I got to the end of it. I had so many unanswered questions. There were so many unresolved story elements. How does this work? How does that work? Why can't he succeed? And I suddenly realised that I totally missed the point of the novel. It's one of the greatest sort of literary moments I've ever had, when I suddenly realised what Kafka was doing, and I immediately reread the thing, now absolutely enchanted by his ability to sort of hem this main character in at every turn. By the end of the book, Joseph is completely alienated and dehumanised by this absurd bureaucracy, and he never discovers what exactly it is that he's meant to have done. The Trial is a novel that you can read in a day, and every time you're on the hold to some company in their pointless bureaucracy, you'll think about it. This is a titan of a book of unbelievable scope and depth. I think that Robert Caro might be one of the most impressive writers I've ever encountered. How someone manages to write with such accuracy, detail and interest, I'll never understand. This book is huge, and it's not even Robert Caro's longest work. His biography of Lyndon Johnson has stretched now to 5 volumes. Such is the capacity for extensive research of an author like Caro. This is a book about Robert Moses, who's now somewhat of a dirty name in America, but he used to be a hero in New York. Part of the reason why opinions have changed on him is because of this biography. If you can point to something in New York, there's a pretty good chance that Robert Moses built it. This biography wrestles with this interplay between what it takes to get things done in a difficult and slow political system and the slow corruption of a once idealistic young man who is corrupted by an almost unlimited amount of power. There's 2 reasons why you'll think about this book all the time. One is the sheer competency and effectiveness of Robert Moses at the height of his control. There's a chapter in the book where it details a shortfall in funding for one of his major projects and how Moses uses every tool and trick in the book, and some that aren't, to find the millions of dollars he needs. The insight you'll gain into the modern political system from this book is invaluable, not just for the American political system, but for any Western democracy. The currency of politics is the money from these massive infrastructure projects. You see exactly how they use that to manipulate landowners and control politicians. The other thing that stays with me in this work is how Robert Caro is able to take what could be a completely mundane and dry topic and make it exciting. These are the inner workings of legalese and policy writing and financial implements, and he turns it into an absolutely riveting page turner. It's no easy feat to read a book like this. It's extremely long, but you will be rewarded for your perseverance. Not a single page in the book is wasted. My name's Harry Smith, and this is Pages to Practice. Have you got a book that stays with you? Is there a book that you think about all the time? Let me know in the comments. I want to thank you for listening to this, and I hope that you read some of these books. There's links to all 3 down in the description below. If you like what you heard here today, you might like my writing, which I publish for free on Substack.